Okay, guys, so what remains in this section is solving equations using so-called zero-factor property. Now, the zero-factor property, just to remind you, tells you that if you have a product of two things and it's equal to zero, that tells you that either the first one is zero or the second one is zero. Okay, so these two factors A and B multiplied give you zero. How can two numbers multiply to zero? Only when one of them is zero or the other one. Okay, so we're going to look at a couple of examples of how to solve, but before we do that, I want to demonstrate that actually lots of these examples can be verified. Now, that's not going to substitute for you showing your work. You still have to explain how you got the answer, but at least you can check and see what the answer will be using your calculator, okay? So let's say my goal is to figure out when is x squared minus 2x minus 24 equals 0. Now, I can graph that if I have a graphing calculator, and I can see when this function intersects the x-axis. In other words, has x-intercepts, right? So, for example, if I just use the Desmos calculator for a second and I entered something like x squared minus 2x minus 24, I would see that the x-intercepts occur at negative 4, 0 and also occur at 6, 0. So I know that the answers are x equals negative 4 and x equals 6. Those are your answers. But what if you don't have a graphing calculator and on a test you usually don't have access to it, but you want to solve it but not sure whether you got it right or wrong? You can check it on this calculator. So you would go to table, you would go ahead and enter your function. So it's x squared minus 2x minus 24, and you press enter, and then you just go ahead and scroll down, press OK. So what that does, it gives you the values of this left hand side, this part, x squared minus 2x minus 24, and what you want is you want that to be 0, right? And so you can then go up and down using the arrows. So I would switch to y's, and if you can find a 0 on the y's, that's what you're looking for. So right here, I already know that 0 on y's happens when x equals negative 4. So I already know that's one of the answers, right? So if I continue scrolling up, it looks like the numbers are just going up, so they're unlikely to go to 0. So let me try the other side and see if maybe they'll get 0 there. So as I keep scrolling, at some point I will hit this other 0, and then I see that that happens at x equals 6. And generally when you have a quadratic equation, so that means that the highest degree is 2. So this right here is 2. That's called quadratic equation. That equation cannot have more than 2 answers. So 2 answers is like the largest possible number of solutions. It is also possible that you have only one, and it's also possible that you have none, but we'll talk about that actually in the next section. But right now, when they ask you to factor, usually there will be 2 solutions, because it's possible to factor it first and then use zero factor property. So now let's say we do not know. Let's say I did not just tell you that the calculator can tell you the answer. So let's set that aside. We don't have that. And let's see if we can try to use zero factor property. So in order to do that, you have to factor. You have to factor the left-hand side. Also, you need to make sure that everything that you have is on the left side, and on the right side, you got 0. So if the equation, and sometimes that's what they do, they would start with something like this. You cannot start factoring the left-hand side at this point because the right-hand side is not 0. Do you see that the right-hand side is 24? So this zero factor property only works when the right-hand side is 0. It does not work when the right-hand side is 5 or 24 or whatever. So your first step in solving this by zero factor property would be to subtract 24 from both sides. Also, do not ever combine terms that are not combinable. So 2x has an x, 24 does not have an x, so it's not combinable. So you can't do that. Okay, so if you did this, then you go back to here, and now you have yourself an equation that you're trying to factor. So let me remind you how to factor. What you're going to do is look for pairs of numbers that would multiply to negative 24, right? Because the negative is included, so they have to multiply to this number. So that should be the product. So whatever pairs you find, the product should be negative 24 every time. So I'll have a whole bunch of pairs here, but every time it should be negative 24. Okay, so negative 24. At some point, once I find a pair, I could stop. I don't have to list all of them. And then they have to add up to the coefficient of x. So that would be the number that's in front of x, and that would be this right here. So the sum has to be negative 2, right? So let's see which pairs would work. So what two numbers multiplied give me a negative 24? So first of all, I have to understand that one of these numbers has to be negative. There's no way that it's going to be a two positives or two negatives, because the product of two positives is positive. The product of two negatives is also positive. So it has to be one negative, one positive. So let's try that. So first of all, of course, we can have 1 and negative 24. That multiply that, that's going to be negative 22. The sum though here is negative 23. So that doesn't work. You can also try negative 1, positive 24. That adds up to positive 23. So that does not have a sum of negative 2. The winning combination has to have this as a sum, the purple one. Okay, so let's try another one. Well, 2 and also negative 12. If we add them up, that gives us negative 10. So we're still not there yet. Negative 2, positive 12 gives us positive 10. So that doesn't work. So we're going to have to continue with the table. Let me just erase this part right here. So I'll still going to continue here listing the other pairs, because unfortunately 24 has a lot of different possibilities there. So product has to be negative 24. So how about 3? Yes, 3, yes. 3, negative 8. The sum of that's negative 5. That still doesn't work because I want negative 2. Negative 3, positive 8. That's positive 5. So that doesn't work either. Man, oh man, I've gotten myself into a pickle here, right? With so many combinations. Now, I think this one is going to work. 4 and negative 6. The product of that's negative 24. The sum of these is negative 2. So I really don't have to continue. I do have also negative 4, 6. And maybe that's it. I don't know. But I already got the winning one. So this is my winning combination. Okay, because the sum is negative 2, which matches this number right here. So these two numbers, 4 and negative 6, will be my answers when I want to factor. Now, if you notice something, I want you to be very careful here, because this is a super common mistake. Once people find these two numbers, the pairs that work, they think that that's the solutions. So they think that x equals 4 and y equals negative 6. But that does not work. Remember, we found this using our calculator. We know it's the opposite. X equals positive 4 and x equal, I'm sorry, our answer was negative 4 and 6 as opposed to 4, negative 6. So how come these signs are not the same? I mean, we found the winning combination. But remember that we didn't really solve anything yet. We found the combination, and now we can factor, but we didn't solve it. So to factor, you're gonna hit x minus 4, and then no, x plus 4, x minus 6, and we still have that equal to 0, right? Okay, so now when the product of two things is equal 0, that means either one of them equals 0 or the other one equals 0, right? Which tells you that either x plus 4 equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. So I did that by using what's called zero factor property, right? Because I have two things that are multiplied, and this is really at times, right? And so these you have to actually solve first. So you would subtract negative 4. Here I would get x equals negative 4. This is going to cancel. Over here I would add a 6 to both sides, so that gives me x equals 6. And now these solutions, now they match to the ones that I had here, negative 4 and positive 6. Okay, so these are the two solutions here. Now in the next video we're going to look at a couple of more examples, but that's basically in a nutshell how you would solve by using zero factor property.